All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're setting out to decode a business model you literally drive past every single day. We're doing a deep dive financial breakdown of gas stations, tearing down exactly how they work, how they actually make their money, and why pretty much everything you think you know about them is probably wrong. So let's just dive right in. Admit it, you've totally done this exact math in your head while standing there waiting for your tank to fill up, right? You look around, see the brake glowing signs, lines of cars idling, hundreds of gallons flowing every single hour. You think to yourself, man, at $3 a gallon with 10 pumps going around the clock, they must absolutely be swimming in cash. Well, I'm here to burst that bubble, because the gas station you're picturing in your head, the one where money flows like fuel through a nozzle, doesn't actually exist. The real business is way more complicated, heavily regulated, and honestly, incredibly fragile. So here is our roadmap for today. We're going to hit 1, the pump illusion, 2, the 5 ownership models, 3, the reality of fuel prices, 4, the secret of profitability, 5, the underground financial risks, and finally, 6, the crucial importance of location.
Okay, let's jump straight into part 1, the pump illusion, and what you are really buying. When people think about buying a gas station, they usually picture a pretty simple retail transaction, right? You buy a cash register, a small brick building, and some hoses. But the sheer scale of the infrastructure is kind of staggering. You aren't just buying retail space. You're buying the dirt. You're excavating deep into the earth to install multiple 20,000-gallon double-walled steel vaults designed to hold highly flammable liquids. You're dealing with strict zoning boards, massive environmental impact studies, and heavy canopy engineering built to withstand hurricane-force winds. Plus, you're inheriting incredibly rigid environmental permits and long-term supply contracts. The barrier to entry isn't just having a fat stack of cash, it's navigating intense bureaucracy and serious civil engineering just to unlock the front doors.
Moving right along to section 2, the 5 ownership models and structuring the business.
Walk into literally any station in America, and you're standing inside one of 5 fundamentally different business setups. A fully independent owner owns the land, the tanks, and the store, meaning they have maximum control, but they also take on maximum risk. Then you have a franchise operator who pays heavy royalties to a big brand like Shell or BP, but has to operate under strict corporate rules. Company-owned means a huge corporation runs it directly with salaried employees. Dealer-operator is where an oil company owns the land but leases out the daily grind. Now, why would giant companies like Exxon prefer to lease out the operations? Well, it's all about shifting the liability. They want the juicy real estate value without the headache of managing cashiers or cleaning up oil spills. And finally, you have the standalone lease operator model. That lease operator model usually relies on something called a triple net lease. So the deal here is that a totally separate real estate investor owns the property and the operator, the tenant, pays for absolutely everything. And I mean everything. They pay the rent, the property taxes, the insurance, the maintenance. The investor basically just kicks back and collects a check while the operator carries every single ounce of the daily risk. Ultimately, how much money you make depends entirely on which of these models you're locked into. But let's say you want to bypass all of that and just build a brand new station from the ground up today. Well, you're looking at dropping anywhere from $2 to $5 million. That massive number covers prime suburban real estate, millions in physical construction, and upwards of $750,000 just for the underground tanks and modern leak detection systems. Because of this steep upfront cost, banks heavily scrutinize these deals. Actually, getting the financing is often the hardest part of the entire gig. Banks are terrified of funding these projects. Why? Because if the business goes under, the bank doesn't just lose their money, they repossess a potentially contaminated piece of commercial real estate that is practically impossible to sell to anybody else.
All right, on to section 3, the reality of fuel prices and following the supply chain. Before you can sell a single drop of gas to a driver, that fuel goes on a massive logistical journey. It starts way out at an oil field, gets pumped to a refinery to be processed into gasoline, travels through a huge network of pipelines to regional storage terminals, which the industry calls the rack, and finally gets loaded onto an 18-wheeler to head to the station. Now, the rack is a super vital step. This is where generic, unbranded fuel gets specialized. It's where specific detergents and proprietary additives for brands like Chevron get blended in. By the time that truck actually rolls up to the station, heavy costs, labor, tariffs, overhead, transportation have been stacked onto that fuel at every single step of the journey.
Let's break down the hard math here. When you pay, say, $3.11 at the pump, 60% of that goes straight back to the global crude oil market. Refining and distribution take another 20%. Federal and state governments take a massive bite in taxes. sometimes up to 60 cents in certain states. And those credit card swipe fees? They take about 8 cents per gallon right off the top. The station owner is left with a gross margin of barely 30 to 35 cents. Once they pay their own operating expenses, their actual net profit is closer to 10 or 15 cents a gallon. Just think about that for a second. It literally means the bank that issued the credit card sitting in your pocket right now often makes more profit per gallon of gas than the guy who owns the station.
This perfectly explains why gas prices behave so weirdly. Economists call this the rockets and feathers phenomenon, because the owner's margins are so razor thin, they have zero cushion. Imagine a summer where a global event causes oil prices to spike overnight. The station owner starts panicking, right? Their wholesale costs just skyrocketed, so they absolutely have to shoot their street prices up instantly, like a rocket. Otherwise, they'll actively lose money on every gallon they sell. But when wholesale costs eventually come back down, they lower their prices super slowly, drifting down like a feather. They do this just to recoup the horrific losses they took during the initial spike. So it's not malicious corporate price gouging, it's literally just a desperate survival mechanism for a business with terrible margins.
Which brings us to part 4, the secret of profitability and the real financial engine.
So if they aren't making money on the gas, where is the cash actually coming from? Well, here's the big twist. While fuel drives the vast majority of the top-line revenue, the big flashy numbers you see on a balance sheet, it only brings in about 38% of the gross profit. The inside store, the snacks, the sodas, the hot dogs, the lottery tickets, that generates over 61% of the actual profit. More than 6 out of every $10 of profit comes from inside the building, not from out at the pumps. This dictates everything about the store's layout. Have you ever wondered why the milk and the beer are always hiding in the very back of the store? Totally by design. They want to force you to walk past the high-margin candy, the chips, and those impulse-buy electronics just to get to the basics. The secret to this whole operation is margins. Gas gives the owner an 11% gross margin on a really good day. But take a look at a humble cup of brewed coffee. That carries a jaw-dropping 90% gross margin. It costs the owner maybe 23 cents in beans, hot water, and a paper cup, and they will happily sell it to you for up to $5.
Let this mind-blowing comparison sink in for a minute. A single cup of coffee generates more bottom-line profit for the business than a customer pulling up and pumping 12 gallons of gasoline. No joke. The fuel is literally just the bait. Smart operators figured this out decades ago. Modern gas stations are basically building full-on fast food restaurants inside their walls now. Places like Wawa, Buc-ee's, or Casey's, they're making way more money selling you a custom sandwich or a slice of breakfast pizza than they ever will on premium unleaded. The food is the business. The fuel is just a heavily subsidized billboard to get you to pull into the parking lot.
Now, moving to part 5, the underground financial risks and toxic liabilities.
So they rely completely on the store to survive. But we kind of have to darken the tone here, because there are existential, toxic risks literally buried beneath that highly profitable convenience store. To legally operate those underground tanks, owners face relentless, aggressive EPA compliance. You can't just dig a hole and drop a tank in anymore. You are required to install double-walled tanks, vapor recovery systems, and automatic statistical leak detection software. And get this, if that leak detection software flags even a tiny discrepancy in pressure, it can automatically shut down the entire fuel system. The punks lock up, the business halts instantly, and the owner is thrown into full panic mode. Combine that with massive premiums for pollution liability insurance, and you've got constant, stressful overhead eating away at those thin margins every single day. And if those prevention systems actually fail, the reality is devastating. The average cost of an environmental cleanup is $154,000. And a cleanup doesn't just mean writing a check for a fine. It means ripping up the concrete, shutting down the business for weeks, and removing toxic soil with specialized hazmat teams. And remember, that $154,000 is just the average. If a fuel leak seeps into the local groundwater, that number easily explodes into the millions. There are over 54,000 sites in the U.S. right now just waiting for cleanup. When you buy a gas station, you're buying the environmental liability buried directly beneath it. A single unchecked leak can absolutely destroy a business overnight. Let's bring our analysis back up to the surface for part 6, the crucial importance of location, the ultimate determining factor. Even if you have amazing food margins and perfectly secure tanks, there is one ultimate factor for success. This is how professional developers ruthlessly evaluate sites. Yes, you obviously need massive average daily traffic,
But traffic isn't enough on its own. You need completely frictionless access. A physical concrete median in the road that blocks left turns, that can instantly cut your customer capture rate in half because tired commuters simply will not make U-turns just to get gas. You need signalized corner orientations. You need what the industry calls anchor traffic generators. That means being strategically positioned on the going home side of the street from a major industrial park or right off a busy highway exit so drivers naturally just flow right into your lot. Bad access means bad volume, and no amount of high-margin coffee can save a station that's annoying to pull into.
Let's pull all this together and look at the brutal monthly reality of a real, functioning mid-size station. They bring in a massive $461,000 in gross top-line revenue. Looks incredible, right? But wait. After paying for the actual wholesale fuel and store inventory, they've got $87,000 in gross profit. Then you factor in the operating expenses, wages for a 20-person team, huge electricity bills to keep those coolers running 24/7, and those predatory credit card fees. That eats up over $42,000. Subtract another $33,500 for heavy property debt and equipment depreciation. So what's actually left at the end of the month? A net operating income of barely $11,000. Less than 3 cents of every single dollar in sales actually flows to the bottom line for the owner.
And that leads us to the most critical takeaway of this entire explainer. If that convenience store simply vanished, the fuel profit alone wouldn't even come close to covering the operating expenses. The station would actively lose $12,500 every single month just by pumping fuel. This math completely shatters that printing money myth we talked about at the very beginning.
So, I want to leave you with this thought. The next time you pull up to the pump on your morning commute, take a look around. Check out the massive size of the coffee station inside. Look for the car wash out back. Observe the fresh prepared food counter. Will you finally see it for what it really is? It isn't a gas station at all. It's a brilliant, high-wire retail operation that relies entirely on a $4 cup of coffee to keep the lights on, the environmental alarms quiet, and the fuel flowing. Thanks for tuning in to this explainer, and keep learning.